You gotta wish you knew that you were living in the good times before the good times were over, which is a statement that's very much applicable to video game magazines. I wasn't in on the heyday of the 80s and 90s video game magazines, particularly the 90s to my knowledge, but I was in the early 2000s to mid 2000s when there was still a wide range of different print magazines that you could order and have shipped to your house for say $20, $25, and many of them, especially in the early 2000s, included those demo discs that were just absolutely awesome. And while all of that content is easily accessible today online, it's just not quite the same as getting that physical piece of media in the mail. And like I talked about in 2020, the last holdout of the mainstream video game magazines is GameInformer, which still continues to be printed today. And I think that's absolutely awesome, but very disappointing to see kind of where the magazine has gone. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but I want to preface this by saying that GameInformer likely survives because it's owned by GameStop, and it's something that's included with your GameStop PowerUp Rewards membership. So if you subscribe to PowerUp Rewards, you become a subscriber of the GameInformer magazine. You can, take a little bit of a discount, like $5 or something, to get the digital copy of the magazine instead of the print copy. I'm assuming the people who are getting the digital copy of the magazine just flat out don't care about the magazine, because if you cared about it all, $5 to get a year's worth of magazines, which I think is like 10 issues only now, sent to your door, is a good deal and something that I like having, holding on to, and being able to collect. I subscribed to GameInformer initially in 2008 and have kept every issue since then, which has kind of created this ginormous back catalog of sort of reading content that I can use to kind of revisit kind of the history of that era of video games, from like little after the PS3 and the Xbox 360 came out up until today. Now, GameInformer today, like I said, only 10 issues, down from 12. That's disappointing in its own right. The page counts have gotten slimmer. I want to say now they're around 80 pages, whereas some of my 2008 issues are like 120, maybe even say like 140 issues in December. Those December issues were always hitting. And this can be partially attributed to the decreased number of advertisements in the magazine, which sounds great on paper, but seeing a print ad for a video game that you were hyped to have come out only hyped you up to another level. And the fact that that's absent is actually disappointing. I did like looking at those ads. I like going back and looking at those ads in those older magazines. And it really is too bad that we don't get many print ads in that fashion anymore, just because the publishers don't think that that's, a good way to go about selling their games. Because it's like, look, today you can get a lot more reach off of giving an influencer a free code for your game, maybe greasing the palms a little bit, and ultimately you can get your game in front of a lot more eyeballs than having it in a print magazine. The overall structure of the magazine, thankfully, has not changed much over the years. It still opens with letters from readers, which I think is absolutely phenomenal, that there's still people that want to write into a print magazine, and those are the people that are really passionate about this, I think, like I am. This follows up with some shorter articles before actually getting into usually 2, maybe 3 longer articles, one of which is the cover article, before going into some previews and reviews. And what's really missing here is the fact that sometimes there is just one cover article, and the other cover article is solely previews. I'm talking they're previewing stuff that maybe doesn't even have like a set hard release date yet, and they're writing like a paragraph about it with one screenshot of the game, really in a way seemingly to just fill page space. And while kind of this white empty space in the page is done for kind of a stylistic reason, it really does show that there are a lot less people working on this magazine than there was 10, 15, 20 years ago. When you compare it to something like Popular Mechanics, I guess it's somewhat of a relief to see that it's in this state, because Popular Mechanics is just loaded with cheesy advertisements for things you would never want to buy, different mail order products, and that has really overtaken the magazine. My entire time subscribing to Popular Mechanics back in the day, that was an issue where there was a lot of those types of ads, but now it seems like that makes up half the content in Popular Mechanics. And further proof that there's a lot less people working on this magazine than there was before, in a given month you may see 10 games have proper reviews. I'm talking reviews that have a numerical score, and while some of those reviews may boil down to just a simple paragraph, and only maybe 3 or 4 of them may have that full extended review that we used to see far more frequently, it would give you the impression that there's a lot less big games releasing these days. And that is true to an extent, because AAA games do take longer to put together, but in reality, there's many, many more games being released in any given week than there was 10 or 20 years ago, because so many different indie titles are making their way out there, and knowing about some of those titles that are underrated or that the GI staff think are worth your time might be something that might actually give this magazine some more value. Instead, they're reviewing games that are very popular already. They're the mainstream AAA hard-hitting titles that people are more than likely to go out and buy if they're a fan of the franchise anyways. Those are the games that they're reviewing, and that's likely because GameStop knows that those are the games that they can try and move copies of, get pre-orders for if they could get the magazine out prior to the game being launched, which is very, very rare these days. But in a large sense, this is just a marketing tool for GameStop now. The last remaining print physical game magazine that has widespread US circulation is just an advertising tool for GameStop. And while there are other gaming magazines out there, many of which seem like they're in Europe and cost like $15 an issue to get circulated here to America, there are other options, but even those are oftentimes a different approach than you would typically see back in the day. They might focus on, say, retro content, and they might kind of take a time period in history and make that be what's being focused on for the issue, but they aren't going to be your true traditional covering the games that are coming out now sort of experience like you have with GameInformer, because ultimately that model has been shown to be very slow compared to the internet, and apparently that's no longer what people want to see. But for myself, as somebody that enjoys the history of video games, being able to have this print media that's kind of set in place, have that, hold on to it, and be able to look back on it in the future, that's something that I wish would be, preserved a little bit better. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Bailey, and I will see you in the next video.